That was a lukewarm start. Hi, I'm Chad, and welcome to another Motovlog. In today's video, we are going to talk about a topic that I haven't really directly addressed or been asked, but I'm just kind of connecting some dots between what kind of questions I've gotten in comments and my own thoughts and opinions. So today, we're going to talk about my thoughts on sport bikes, full sport bikes, so super bikes, super sport bikes, bikes with tall windscreens and low clip-on bars, aggressive body positioning designed to go racing, but with headlights and taillights, of course, because street legality, and what I think in a lot of cases is a better alternative, which is the naked sport bike or hyper naked, such as my Tuono V4. So in case you haven't watched my other videos to establish some credibility, hi, I'm Chad, and I've been riding motorcycles for over 8 years. Been doing track days for almost 7 years, had a little bit of a break from 2017 to 2020, but got back out on track at the beginning of 2020 and actually started club racing last year. Got at least, I think at this point, 50,000 miles under my belt in total. For the first 6 years that I rode, I had a super sport bike, and that was it. My first bike was a 2003 Honda CBR 600RR. Had that bike from December of 2013 until August of 2015. And just after that, I bought my 2006 Triumph Daytona 675, which I had from August of 2015 to August of 2019. Unfortunately, it did not have an engine in it for the last 4 or 5 months of its life. But in May of 2019, I purchased a 2012 Triumph Daytona 675R while I was still trying to figure out what to do about my 2006 Daytona 675, which I ended up selling to a salvage yard for parts. But in June of 2020, I bought my first naked bike. It was a 2017 Aprilia Tuono V4 1100RR, so not this bike, but I had the RR for about 10 months, and it completely changed my perception of what a good street bike is. The only reason that I no longer have that bike is because I decided I wanted the factory. So I got the factory, which is exactly the same bike aside from the suspension, the steering damper, the tail section, just the fairings. Still uses the same subframe and the graphics. Still has all the same electronic rider aids, still has the same chassis, same engine, same dash. It's an awesome bike. But up until that point, for 6.5 years, all I knew was super sport bikes. And as I got more and more into sport riding, especially going to the racetrack, I started to modify my bike so that it was better for that. Aftermarket clip-ons, aftermarket rear sets, get those pegs up a little bit higher and a little bit further back, get those bars out a little bit further. And bike just isn't comfortable to ride like when you're just cruising. You know, you're very far forward and hunched over, your legs are tucked up all tight, although, if I'm being totally honest, the lower body positioning for this bike is very much like a super sport bike, or a super bike. High pegs, kind of far back, but I'm used to that part. The thing that changed the world for me was a handlebar. Being able to sit more upright. It's much easier on your back. It makes it a lot easier to ride long distances over long periods of time. But at the same time, the Tuono actually has one of the lowest flat handlebars that I've ever seen on a naked bike. So you can still get into a pretty aggressive body position on this thing when you're riding on the track or carving up the canyons. It's kind of the best of both worlds in my opinion. Now, I am fortunate enough to be able to own multiple motorcycles. So I've got my 2017 Tuono V4 factory. I also still have my 2012 Triumph Daytona 675R that is now a dedicated track bike and race bike. And I have a 2009 Yamaha WR250X for hoots and giggles. So I'm going to try not to be too biased here because, of course, I have a bike for every situation that I ride in, essentially. Got the Daytona for the track, and that's all it goes to. It's not street legal anymore. No lights, no kickstand, safety wired and race prepped. And I've got the Tuono, which is a blast to ride on the road, still a blast to ride on the track. Done a few track days on this bike. And then I've got the WR for if I just need to get around town. Got some wheelie practicing on that bike and really upped my skills that way. So I'm definitely the exception here. But let me talk to you a little bit about why I think you should probably consider a naked bike if you're buying a sport bike and you're not going to be going to the racetrack all the time. So the biggest reason is that you get comfort. You know, and the Tuono V4 Factory is definitely on the less comfortable side of naked sport bikes, but it's still much better than my Daytona 675R ever was when I was riding it on the street. You again have that nice upright body position, easy to take weight off of your arms, easier to support yourself with your core because you're not so far leaned over. But of course that comes at the cost of wind protection. So while this bike does have a little windscreen, it really doesn't do much. You have to be fully tucked chin to tank really for it to be impactful in any way, shape, or form. And it's still so marginal. That said though, when you are moving at highway speeds, you can also just support yourself with the wind. So this does take a little bit more core strength and put a little bit of stress on your lower back, but no more than you'd already have if you were trying to support yourself hunched over holding on to clip-ons. You can just lean into the wind and let the wind support you. But back to the upsides, in a lot of cases you can buy a naked bike that has similar performance to a full-on super sport or super bike. Case in point, Tuono V4 Factory. While it's not quite as high performance as the RSV4 is, it's still pretty close, and it's actually set up to be a better street bike because it's supposed to do that too. The RSV4 has super tall gearing, getting close to, if not over, 100 miles an hour in first gear, and definitely has a tune so that it is more geared towards top-end power than mid-range. And the Tuono is a bit different than that. It still has a lot of power up top, not as much as the RSV4, but more than enough, and it's got more mid-range power. That makes it a lot better to use around town, on the street, in traffic. But again, you still have some pretty solid top end, and you've got an incredible superbike chassis and suspension to boot. So this thing will hold its own in the corners without any problem at all. So to be fair, let's talk about when a super sport bike or a superbike are appropriate in my opinion. And like I said at the beginning of this video, it's when you're going to the racetrack a lot. Now, I'm looking at it from a purely practical standpoint. I totally understand and don't judge you at all if you just want the superbike or the super sport because it looks awesome. It does, I can't argue that. I definitely think the RSV4 is a little bit prettier than the Tuono V4, but I just don't think that the trade-offs are worth it, considering how much I use this bike on the street. The RSV4, or again, any super sport versus its naked counterpart, is going to be much better at the racetrack. You have wind protection, you have the lower bars so that you can get into a better body position for going fast. And that was in virtual reality, of course, because we don't do wheelies on the real street, just in my virtual computer simulator where all of my motovlogs take place. So the super sport or super bike is going to be objectively better on the track. It's going to have slightly firmer suspension in most cases. It might even be more adjustable if you're talking on the lower end of things with bikes like the MT-07 versus the R7, or the R7, for example, is going to have a wider range of adjustability. And as you get into lower classes, you'll find that in a lot of cases, the super sport variant, like again the R7 compared to the MT-07 or the RS660 compared to the Tuono 660, are not as different as a hyper naked versus a super bike. They're going to be a lot different, but you're not going to have quite as crazy of a riding position on an RS660 as you are on an RSV4 or on an R7 as you are on R1, but it's still going to be more aggressive than the naked version of the bike. And again, super sports, super bikes generally have taller gearing, an engine that is geared more towards top end performance. It's just a lot of advantages at the racetrack. So, if you're thinking about a super sport bike, a super bike, but you're riding on the road more often than the track, I highly suggest take a look at what's out there in the naked category. I have a good feeling you're going to find something with similar performance but is more comfortable for your situation and probably just a better fit overall. But what are your thoughts? Do you prefer superbikes? Again, if you're committed to the look, I totally get it. But let me know in the comments below. And with that, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I would sincerely appreciate it if you give me a gentle little click of the like button and consider subscribing for more motorcycling content. Again, drop a comment below. What do you think about my thoughts? What are your thoughts? Are you a superbike, super sport kind of person? Or do you have the same appreciation for the naked and hyper naked bikes that I do? Let's talk about it. With that, thanks so much for watching, and I will hope to catch you in the next one. Until then, later.